As a male educator at your school site, it can get lonely. Only 23% of K-12 educators in America are male. And just think about what this gender gap means for your male students. Whether it's walking down the halls or acting out, they experience disproportionate levels of discipline. This is a show for male educators who want to feel more understood by their community and want to create emotionally safe classrooms and schools for the next generation of male students. Welcome to Unmasking Male Educators. Welcome back, folks. We have returned from this time away to go and rejuvenate, refresh. You're going to be hearing and seeing some new things as we move this new show to really being direct and focused on talking to educators. We believe this next set of conversations that we're going to have as we're taking off the mask with educators, as we're unmasking what's happening in education with males, we know that, as you heard in the data in the intro, our men are struggling in education. Not only in our numbers of how many are in the classroom, 23%. Now, that breakdown happens a little different than you may think. So when you think about elementary school, actually there's 89% of teachers are women. When you move into middle school, it goes down to 72%. And so I probably should give you the other numbers so that you can get clear about the number. I'm giving you the numbers of women, but let me give you the numbers of men. In elementary school, there are 11% male educators. When you get to middle school, there's 28%. And when you get to high school, it moves up to about 40%. And we know that that's really true in high school because you have a lot of the PE teachers and you have a lot of the sports, and the coaches are usually teachers. So there's a lot more males in high school education than there are in the lower grades. But the average overall is that it's heavily dominated by women, you know? One of the things that I think is important for these conversations is that we make room for how are we going to improve education for young men who are struggling, while also making sure that we have some resources and tools to recruit more males to education. Now, we have no desire to be a recruiter for males in education. We hope we can inspire them. When I taught, my teaching took me to lots of different levels of education. I started at a high school math. Then I went to a K-8 school, independent school. And if you don't know what independent schools are, they're the top 2-3% of all private schools. So you have the private schools and then you have independent schools. They have special certifications that become an independent school, and you should check them out. Like, there is something amazing happening in not only independent schools, private schools, but what is happening with students when we create spaces that they can learn. Very important. And then I left the independent school in Marin County, for those who know the Bay Area, in Marin County, one of the top per capita wealthiest places in the country. And you may want to extrapolate that to probably the world. Then I come back to Oakland at a charter school in the Fruitvale district. And then I went back to my alma mater as a dean. And then I was in administration as a vice principal, assistant principal for 2 years before I went to my fellowship at the D school and then on to doing this work in Ever Forward full time. So it was a 13-year journey of education, 10 years as an educator and then 3 years as an administrator. But I want to talk about how it felt. In these conversations, we're going to be talking to men and asking them, what is it like to be a male at your school campus? What is it like? And I think that the opportunity to have these conversations is really for us to say, are we making sure that for the educators that are we making sure that for the educator there's a safe space to be ourselves, to be able to show up? And where are the places that it's a challenge? Now, here's a couple of things that I do know. As a male educator myself who taught for 10 years, my first school site, I was the only Black male teacher there. There were several male educators in the school, maybe a handful, let's say 10, maybe. But thinking about how many looked like me, there were none, right? Now, does that matter all the time? No, it doesn't matter all the time. I think that styles are different. Like, I know that my style and the way I worked with my students was pretty loud, sometimes People would call it aggressive. They would sometimes even feel like it was like, is he trying to battle with the students? No, not really. But am I willing to let a student argue with me? Yeah, I'm not. I'm willing to go back and forth for a little bit. I didn't never thought of it as like not doing good classroom management. I think sometimes students needed to hear their voice be heard and hear their argument has the flaws that it has. Let them challenge me on my things. I never took it personal that a student wanted to argue with me. And there were some times where I told the student, we're not having this conversation. There were times where I had to be clear about what expectations I had in my classroom and what they could do in other classrooms that may not match what I'm willing to accept. One idea, there's probably a couple of, there's lots of stories I can tell you about education, lots of stories of difficulties. I'm not sure if I'm going to give you a clear story about the difficulty of being a male educator in this story, but I want to tell you about what it felt like knowing that I was in this body that I had to navigate. So you'll probably hear this story down the line, or maybe you've already heard it before if you've heard any of my talks. But I came back from a Fulbright fellowship in India. I came back to my school site. I was in India for 7 months. So when I left in July, it was your summertime. I came back in January for the second semester, and I was ready to kick it off and get back to working with my students. I was running the Ever Forward Club at that time. So we had two big events to pull off between in weeks. I had like a few weeks to pull off our college tour and the 5K and the 24-hour relay, which was our annual event. And when I got back, our school had a new principal. So I was in the midst of a lot of new stuff happening because I have a new leadership. And I realized early on when I got back that the new leadership, let's just say, didn't like me very much. Now, do I teach for adults to necessarily like me? No, that's not what my job is there for. But if you have a leader and it's your boss, technically, you need there to be some kind of either at least cordial kind of atmosphere so you can do your work. Now, I'm also not just a teacher here. I'm running a program. I'm running the Ever Forward Club. And what I found out right away as we started preparing for events is like everything that this administrator didn't know about me or about Ever Forward was a problem. The college tour we were taking every year. So it was nothing new for me to start planning the college tour, but I was getting pushback on that, the 24-hour relay. And I began to be like, what's going on here? Why is this person creating all this difficulty with me? Why is this person creating all these barriers? And I try to, take deep breaths and be like, okay, don't get over it, Ashanti. Don't worry about it. It's going to be a big deal. And I think the one thing that stood out the most was an incident where students were protesting some injustice that they were concerned about. I went out. I heard about it. They were across the street in front of the school with posters and signs, and they were getting people to honk the horns. Our school was like across the street from this pizza place and donut shop. So like they just cross over the street, and then right over there is these little plazas. So the students were there. And when I went over there, because the bell was going to ring, the principal started telling me, Mr. Branch, get these students back to class. And I'm like, that's not my job. Sorry. Now, I'm not the kind of person who's not my job kind of teacher. I work above and beyond. But if students are protesting, they have the right to protest. What do you mean? Tell them they can't protest? Like, that's not something I'm going to do. And also, that's not my role to be out here rounding up students in the middle of the street. So now I want them to be safe. I want to let them know that if they choose to stay protesting after lunch, that they're going to have some kind of consequences, because there would be. If you don't go to class and the bell rings, you're considered cutting, and there may be some consequences. I just know that. So when the administrator is yelling at me, like, help get these kids back in, I'm just like, in my mind, I didn't say these words out loud. I know you ain't talking to me. Now, I may have looked in that way, but I didn't say any words. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not rounding up a bunch of students. First of all, that's your job. You're the administrator here. I just came out here to see what was going on because I heard there was a bunch of commotion in front of the school. So I go across the street. I meet some of the students who I knew. They were in my class. I say, hey, y'all, if you choose to stay protesting after the bell, just know that there may be consequences. So just don't get upset about the consequences, but just know that if you stay out here. Now, while I'm actually talking to a few of my students, This administrator crosses the street and then tells me again in front of the students, as if she was using me as her platform to get students back to class. Get these students back to class. Mr. Branch, help me get these students back to class. And I'm like, and I'm trying to like be really kind and not like mild off. Like, first of all, you're yelling at me. Second of all, you're trying to get me to do something that's not my role to do. And third of all, like, this is not the way to get me to do anything. Now, she doesn't know me very well because I just got back in the country. I don't know her very well, but I'm also like, I'm not really going to be like having you yelling at me out here. You know, like my kids know me, my students know me. That was not going to be the way it was going to work. So what ends up happening is I cross the street. I'm going back to my class. I'm not got time for this. And I don't have time to be having no battle with no new principal in front of a bunch of students. So I'm walking back across the street. I told my students what I needed to tell them. Hey, make a decision. If you're going to continue protesting, keep that. Just be prepared for whatever consequences. But I'm also have her yapping in my ear. And I'm like, and so I cross the street to go back to the school. I start walking in the front office. And then she kind of gets in front of me. Somehow she gets in front of me because I'm talking to students along the way as things are happening. But I'm not paying attention to her because she's an administrator. Her job is to do all that stuff. I'm a teacher. I'm on my lunch break, right? I'm clear about some things that you're not going to have me doing. But I want students to be safe. So when students are coming up to me, because they heard her yelling at me, they were like, Mr. Branch, you let her yell at you like that? What happened? I'm like, it's all good. Don't worry. And as I get back into the front office, she kind of gets in front of me. I told you to help me get these kids back inside. You're being subordinate. What? I don't know what that word means. I'm sure I know what it means intuitively. I'm sure I know what it means like as a feeling. I'm being what? I said, first of all, that's not my job. I went to tell my students what I needed to tell my students so they knew what consequences could happen. But you're out there yelling like I'm supposed to be doing some job. But she's in my face. Now, look, I'm a big 6'1", 300-pound black man. I don't know her weight. I know she's old, and I know she's white. Now, two things I know about that scenario. That whatever happens, Ashanti has to be careful about many, many things. If you just if it was like a sheet in front of the two people and you disguise the voices and you have somebody yelling at somebody, then you would say, oh, well, if somebody's yelling at you, then you can either say, I'm going to ignore it, I'm going to walk away, I'm going to yell back or whatever. But there'll be less dynamics involved because I'm just yelling at a voice, yelling back at me. I'm in some negotiating with some voice. But when the dynamics are real, then I have to play another role. And the challenge in education is that oftentimes I don't get to speak my mind. I have to speak based on the mask that I need to put on to make my job safe, secure, and that I don't create problems in the future. So listen, education is complex. I know this story may have hit you in many places. You may be like, what the heck? Or what? Maybe you're like, maybe you think I'm at fault. I don't really care. I'm clear that the story of what happens in education are all the ways we show up and the ways we operate are not always equal and not always easy. And so as we continue these conversations with educators, we're going to hear stories of people sharing their heart. And we have to be in listening, finding empathy and understanding that we're going to hear people who operate in the world differently. We're excited about these conversations. We're excited about what's going to come. And we're excited about making a transformation in education so that we can make education serve and be a benefit for all students. That's what we're hoping to do. And thank you for being a part of this show. We're excited about this new season, and we hope that you will get involved. If you know a teacher, educator, community person who you think could benefit from these conversations, please share it with them. Welcome back. We're excited. And our team, Ryan, Kelly, Diane, like you're going to be hearing from folks, but also our youth. We're going to figure out how to integrate our youth voice in these conversations as well, because their voice is extremely important if we're going to really transform schools. So take care. Be well, folks. See you next time. Bye now.